Beneath the holy kingdom of Vidoria, a forgotten seamstress named Eloine was left to die. For 3 weeks, she had been locked beneath the royal palace, accused of a crime she never committed. Above her, the kingdom celebrated the rise of a new Luna. Isadora, the Alpha King's chosen bride, stood before the sacred altar, ready to receive King Cullen's claiming bite. But fate had other plans. At the final moment, the Alpha King stopped the ceremony. His wolf had caught a scent no stone, no prison wall, and no ancient ward could hide. It was not the woman standing beside him. It was not the bride chosen by politics, bloodlines, or power. It was his true mate, and she was buried beneath his feet, alone in the darkness, waiting in chains. Before the night was over, the kingdom would learn that the forgotten prisoner below the palace was not the thief. She was the shadow fate had been hiding all along. The stones wept. Eloine pressed her palm against the dungeon wall, feeling centuries of moisture seep through the cracks. Somewhere far above her head, music swelled through the palace floors. Drums and harps and voices raised in celebration, all of it filtering down to her cell like a cruel lullaby. Today, the kingdom of Vidoria would crown its Luna. Eloine closed her eyes, letting the cold seep into her bones. She had been here for 3 weeks now, buried beneath the very palace where she had once served as a seamstress to the royal household. 3 weeks since Isadora had pointed her elegant finger and accused Eloine of stealing from the Luna's personal chambers. The charges were false. Eloine had stolen nothing, but truth meant little when the accuser was the most powerful woman in the realm, the Alpha King's chosen bride. A ceremonial horn blasted through the stones, and Eloine flinched. That sound marked the beginning of the bonding ritual. Within the hour, Isadora would stand before the sacred altar and receive the Alpha King's claiming bite. She would become Luna, the mother of the pack, second only to the king himself. And Eloine would rot beneath their feet, forgotten. She sank onto the thin straw pallet that served as her bed, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. The guards had taken her cloak when they had thrown her down here. They had taken everything, her dignity, her freedom, her hope, but not the thing she kept hidden deepest of all. Eloine glanced down at her hands, pale and trembling in the darkness. Even now she could feel it stirring beneath her skin, that strange warmth that had lived inside her since childhood. Her mother had called it the shadow gift, the ability to walk between dreams, to slip into the sleeping minds of others like mist through a keyhole. She had never told anyone. Her mother had warned her what happened to women with such abilities. They were burned, drowned, torn apart by the very wolves who claimed to protect them. So Eloine had hidden it, buried it so deep that sometimes she forgot it existed at all. Another horn sounded longer this time. The claiming would happen soon. Eloine imagined Isadora standing in the great hall, draped in white silk and moonflowers, her dark hair cascading down her back like a river of ink. She imagined the Alpha King beside her, the man Eloine had only ever seen from a distance, King Cullen of Vidoria. Even his name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. She had glimpsed him once, crossing the courtyard on his way to the war council. Tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of a winter storm, and eyes like hammered silver. He had moved with the lethal grace of a predator. Every inch the alpha his bloodline promised. He had not seen her. Why would he? She was nothing. A servant, a ghost, a woman who sewed hems and mended tears, and disappeared into the shadows of her own small life. Now she would disappear entirely. Elowen pressed her forehead to her knees, fighting the despair that threatened to swallow her whole. She would die down here, whether by starvation or execution. The end would be the same. No one was coming for her. No one even knew she existed. Far above, the music stopped. Elowen lifted her head, confused by the sudden silence. The coronation ceremony followed a strict order. Drums and horns and chanting that built to the sacred moment of the bite. There should be no silence, not now, not when the ritual was reaching its peak. Then she heard it. Footsteps, not the heavy boots of guards, but something else. Something that made the rats in her cell scatter into the corners with terrified squeaks. The door at the top of the dungeon stairs crashed open. Elowen scrambled to her feet, pulse racing against her ribs. Torchlight flooded down the stone steps, and with it came voices sharp and urgent. "The king has gone mad," someone hissed. He stopped the ceremony. He said he smelled something. Someone. He shifted right there in the great hall. Isadora is furious. She's demanding. The king demands nothing except answers. Find whoever carries that scent. Find them now. Elowen pressed herself against the far wall of her cell, barely breathing. Scent. The wolves tracked by scent, their senses far beyond anything human. But why would the king smell anyone during his own coronation? And why would he stop the ceremony? For the footsteps reached her corridor. A guard appeared before her cell, torch raised high. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something that looked almost like fear. "It's her," he breathed, staring at Elowen as if she had grown a second head. "Goddess above, it's the prisoner. That's impossible." Another guard pushed forward, sniffing the air. His nostrils flared. Then his expression shifted to mirror his companion's shock. "It shouldn't be possible." Elowen's voice emerged as scarcely a breath. "What's happening? I don't understand." Neither guard answered. They simply stared at her with that same terrible wonder, as if she were a miracle and a catastrophe wrapped into one. Then a third voice cut through the darkness, deep and resonant, and laced with an authority that made both guards drop instantly to their knees. "Open the cell." Elowen's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Every subject in Vidoria knew that voice. It commanded armies. It decided fates. It belonged to the most powerful alpha in 3 generations. King Colin stepped into the torchlight, and Elowen forgot how to breathe. He was still wearing his coronation attire, black velvet and silver thread, but the fine fabric was torn at the shoulders where his shift had begun. His eyes, those famous silver eyes, burned with something far more dangerous than anger. They burned gold. "Leave us," he commanded, without looking at his guards. "Your Majesty, the ceremony." "I said leave." The guards fled, and Elowen found herself alone with the Alpha King, separated only by iron bars that suddenly felt like no protection at all. Kalin did not speak immediately. He simply stood there, chest heaving, those molten gold eyes fixed on Elowen with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously flee and fall to her knees. The wolf was close to his surface. She realized, closer than it should ever be during a sacred ceremony. Something was very wrong. "What is your name?" His voice was rough, as if the words were being dragged from somewhere deep in his chest. "Elowyn." Her own voice sounded foreign to her ears. "Elowyn Thorne. Elowyn." He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable like honey on his tongue. Something flickered across his face. Pain or pleasure? She couldn't tell. "Why are you here in my dungeon?" "I was accused of theft, Your Majesty, by the Lady Isadora." His jaw tightened. "And did you steal from her?" "No." Elowyn met his burning gaze, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. "I have never stolen anything in my life." For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, without warning, he reached out and gripped the iron bars of her cell. The metal groaned beneath his hands. "I was standing at the altar," he said, his voice dropping to something barely audible. "Isadora was beside me, ready to receive my bite. And then I smelled something, someone." His golden eyes bored into hers. "You! I smelled you through 3 floors of stone and centuries of wards. My wolf went mad. He nearly killed my own guards trying to reach you." Elowyn's chest tightened. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm just a seamstress." "You're not nobody." The words came out as a growl. "You're mine." The iron bars shrieked as they tore free from their moorings. Elowyn stumbled backward, a scream catching in her throat. But Cullen moved faster than thought. One moment he was outside the cell. The next he was inside with her, his hands gripping her shoulders, his face inches from hers. "Mine," he repeated, and this time the word was barely human. "My wolf has claimed you. I don't know how. I don't know why, but you belong to me." "I don't." Elowyn tried to form coherent words, but his proximity was overwhelming. Heat radiated from his body, seeping into her frozen limbs, and his scent surrounded her. Pine and wood smoke and something wild that made her head spin. "I don't even know you. Neither do I." His laugh was bitter. "I was about to bind myself to another woman. I've been promised to Isadora since we were children. And now my wolf tells me none of that matters. That the only woman who matters is a prisoner I've never seen before." His grip on her shoulders gentled, though he didn't release her. His thumb traced a slow circle against her collarbone, and Elowyn shivered at the unexpected tenderness. "What are you?" he murmured more to himself than to her. "What magic do you carry that could do this to me?" "No magic." The lie tasted sour on her tongue. "I have no magic." But even as she spoke, she felt the shadow gift stir inside her, responding to his proximity, like a flower turning toward the sun. It had never done that before. It had always been cold and quiet, a secret kept in darkness. Now it pulsed with warmth, reaching toward the king as if it recognized him, as if it wanted him. Kalen's nostrils flared. "You're lying," he said softly. "I can smell the power on you, hidden beneath your skin." "What are you hiding, little seamstress?" Before Elowyn could answer, his eyes changed again. The gold brightened, blazed, and became something almost painful to look upon. And then he made a sound that raised every hair on her body. A growl of pure pure, desperate need. "I can't," his voice fractured. "My wolf is too strong. He wants." His head dropped to her throat. Elowyn should have fought. should have screamed, should have done anything except stand frozen as his lips brushed against the sensitive skin where her neck met her shoulder. But the shadow gift inside her was singing now, filling her veins with a warmth that drowned out all rational thought. This was right. Something whispered in her mind. This was meant to be. His tongue traced a hot line up her throat, and she heard herself gasp. "Forgive me," he breathed against her skin. Then his teeth sank deep into her flesh. Pain exploded through Elowin's body, sharp and blinding and overwhelming. She cried out, her hands clutching his shoulders. But the pain was already transforming into something else. Heat flooded through her veins, rushing from the wound outward until every inch of her body burned with it. She felt him in her mind, not just his presence, but his emotions, his confusion, his desperation, his profound and terrifying certainty that she belonged to him. The bond snapped into place between them like a chain forged in fire. And then the shadow gift inside her exploded. Darkness poured from her hands, wrapping around them both like living smoke. Elowin heard Callan cry out in shock, felt him release her throat, but she couldn't see him anymore. She couldn't see anything except shadows that danced and writhed with a power she had never unleashed before. The last thing she heard before consciousness fled was his voice, raw with wonder and fear. "What are you?" Elowin woke to the sensation of silk beneath her cheek. For a confused moment, she thought she was still dreaming. The dungeon had no silk. The dungeon had nothing but cold stone and rotting straw, and the distant mockery of celebration. Then memory crashed over her. The torn bars, the Ping's golden eyes, his teeth in her throat, and she bolted upright with a gasp. She was in a bedchamber, not just any bedchamber, but one of such opulence that it stole her breath. Velvet curtains the color of midnight hung from the windows. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast an ox, and the bed she lay upon was draped in silver silk, soft as clouds against her skin. Her hand flew to her throat. The wound was gone. Elowin's fingers traced the spot where Kaelin's teeth had broken skin. The flesh was smooth and unmarked, as if the bite had never happened at all. But she could still feel it somehow, a phantom sensation of pressure and heat that made her shiver. "Good, you're awake," Elowin spun toward the voice. An elderly woman sat in a chair by the fire, her silver hair braided back from a weathered face. Her eyes, amber and knowing, studied Elowin with careful assessment. "I am Marin," the woman said, "healer to the royal household. You've been unconscious for nearly a full day." "A day?" Elowin's voice cracked. "What happened?" The king has not left the corridor outside that door since he carried you here." Marin's tone was carefully neutral. "He refuses food, rest, and counsel. He simply paces and waits, and occasionally growls at anyone who tries to enter." Elowin felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He bit me." Yes, a claiming bite. Marin's expression grew troubled. Given to a human without consent, without preparation, such a thing has not happened in centuries. What does it mean? Marin was quiet for a long moment. Then she rose from her chair and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, her aged hands folding in her lap. "Among our kind, the claiming bite is sacred. It binds two souls together, creating a bond that transcends physical distance and even death. When an alpha claims his Luna, they become two halves of one whole. Eloin's pulse quickened. But I'm not his Luna, Isadora. Isadora was to be his chosen mate, a political arrangement, not a fated bond. Marin's amber eyes held something that might have been pity. What happened between you and the king was not a choice. It was destiny crying out to be acknowledged. I don't believe in destiny, perhaps not, but the bond believes in you. Marin reached out and touched Eloin's hand. Tell me, child, can you feel him, the king? Is there a thread in your chest that pulls towards something beyond this room? Eloin wanted to deny it. She wanted to insist that she felt nothing, that this was all a terrible mistake. But she could feel him. Even now, with walls between them, she could sense Kaelin's presence like a second heartbeat in her chest. His anxiety pulsed through her, his desperate need to see her, to touch her, to confirm that she still breathed. Yes, she whispered, I feel him. Marin nodded slowly. Then the bond is forming, but it's incomplete. Without a second bite, without you claiming him in return, the bond will remain unstable. And if it remains unstable, the healer's silence was answer enough. Before Eloin could press further, the door burst open. Kaelin stood in the doorway, his silver eyes wild and his chest heaving as if he'd been running for miles. She's awake. His voice was hoarse Aro. I felt her wake. I felt... He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze locking onto Eloin's face. For a moment, neither of them moved. The bond between them hummed with electricity, pulling them toward each other with invisible force. Then Kellen crossed the room in 3 strides and fell to his knees beside the bed. I'm sorry. The words tumbled out of him, raw and broken. I'm so sorry. I couldn't control it. My wolf took over and Your Majesty. Eloin's voice trembled. Please stand up. You shouldn't kneel to me. I should kneel to no one else. He looked up at her, and she saw tears glistening in his silver eyes. I violated you. I forced a bond you never asked for. Whatever punishment you demand, I will accept. Eloin stared at him. This powerful king brought to his knees before her and felt something shift in her chest. Not the bond, but something older, something that had nothing to do with wolf magic, and everything to do with the genuine anguish on his face. You weren't in control, she said softly. You said so yourself. Your wolf, my wolf, is part of me. His actions are my actions. Kaelin's jaw clenched. There is no excuse for what I did. Marin cleared her throat. Perhaps I should leave you two to know. Cullen rose abruptly, composing himself with visible effort. There are things Eloin needs to know, things we both need to understand. His gaze shifted to her, intense and searching. In the dungeon, when I bit you, something happened. Shadows poured from your hands. They wrapped around us both like living darkness. Eloin's blood chilled. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't. His voice was gentle but firm. Don't lie to me, Eloin. Not about this. I felt your power touch my soul. I saw what you carry inside you. The secret she had guarded her entire life was crumbling around her. Eloin looked between Kaelin and Marin, searching for condemnation, for fear, for the hatred she had always been taught to expect. Instead, she saw only wonder. Show me, Kaelin said quietly. Please, show me what you are. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to deny, to run. But the bond in her chest pulsed with encouragement, and Marin was nodding slowly, and Kaelin was looking at her like she was the most miraculous thing he had ever seen. Eowyn closed her eyes. She reached deep inside herself to the cold, dark place where the shadow gift had always lived. But it wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, alive, and eager to be acknowledged. When she opened her eyes, darkness danced between her fingers. Marin gasped. Kaelin simply stared, transfixed as tendrils of shadow, curled and twisted around Eowyn's hands like affectionate serpents. "My mother called it the shadow gift," Eowyn whispered. "The ability to walk in dreams, to touch minds while they sleep. She said, I must never tell anyone. She said they would kill me if they knew." "Kill you?" Callan's voice held an edge of steel for having the old magic. "The old magic was purged from Vidoria generations ago," Marin said quietly. "Those who carried it were hunted, burned, destroyed. The wolves feared what they couldn't control. That ends now." Kaelin rose to his feet, and in that moment, Eowyn saw the king in him, the alpha who commanded legions. "No one will touch her. No one will harm her. She is under my protection, Your Majesty." Marine's voice dropped. "Isadora has demanded an audience. She knows something disrupted the ceremony. When she learns the truth, the door slammed open again. A woman stood on the threshold, beautiful and terrible in her fury. Dark hair cascaded around a face that might have been carved from marble, and her eyes green as poison, fixed on Eowyn with pure hatred. "So this is the creature who ruined my coronation." Isadora's voice dripped with venom. "A prisoner, a thief, a witch? Isadora," Callan's tone carried warning. "You will speak with respect." "Respect?" She laughed high and brittle. "You abandoned me at the altar for this. I have waited my entire life to become your Luna, and you cast me aside for a dungeon rat with dark magic." "I cast aside nothing. Fate intervened." "Fate?" Isadora stepped closer, her beautiful face twisting. "There is no fate. There is only power, and I will not surrender mine to some orphan seamstress with shadow tricks." She raised her hand, and Eowyn saw moonlight gathering at her fingertips. Kaelin moved, but not fast enough. Silver light shot from Isadora's palm, aimed directly at Eowyn's heart. There was no time to think, no time to run. Shadows erupted instinctively, rising like a shield between her and the attack. The collision of light and dark sent shockwaves through the room. When the dust cleared, Isadora was staring at Eowyn with something new in her eyes, something that looked almost like fear. "Impossible," she breathed. "No human could block my magic. She's not just human anymore." Marin's voice was barely audible. "The claiming bite has changed her." Isadora's gaze dropped to Eowyn's throat, to the place where no mark remained, but where the bond had been forged. Understanding dawned, followed by rage so profound it seemed to darken the very air around her. "You will regret this," she hissed at Callan. "Both of you will regret this." She turned and swept from the room, leaving silence in her wake. Callan moved immediately to Eowyn inside. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine." But her hands were shaking, and shadows still curled around her fingers, agitated and restless. "What happens now?" Callan and Marin exchanged a look heavy with meaning. "Now," the king said quietly, "we get you somewhere safe. Isadora has allies throughout the palace, and she will not rest until you are destroyed. But where can I go if she has the reach? You say, there is one place." Kellen took her hands in his shadows and all, the northern territories beyond the Vidorian border. "My mother's people live there, wolves who answer to no crown. They can protect you until we understand what the bond has awakened." "You want me to leave?" The words hurt more than they should have. I want you to live." His voice broke on the last word. "Please, Elowen, let me keep you safe." She saw the agony in his eyes, the war between his need to have her near and his terror of losing her entirely. "How long?" she whispered. "A few weeks, maybe less, just until I can neutralize Isadora's threat." Elowen wanted to refuse. Every fiber of her being screamed against separation, against leaving this man she barely knew, but somehow needed like air. But she also saw the wisdom in his words. Isadora's attack had been swift and merciless. Next time, Elowen might not be fast enough to defend herself. "All right," she said, "I'll go." Relief and anguish weared on Callan's face. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that burned like a brand. "I'll come for you," he promised, "as soon as I can. Nothing in this world will keep me from you." That night, as Bren the guard escorted her through secret passages toward a waiting horse, Eloa felt the bond in her chest stretched thin and aching. She didn't look back. She couldn't, because if she looked back, she would never leave. The northern territories were nothing like Vora, where Callan's kingdom was all stone castles and manicured gardens. This land was raw wilderness. Mountains clawed at the sky, their peaks lost in perpetual mist. Ancient forests stretched in every direction, their trees so old and vast that their roots seemed to grip the very bones of the earth. Elowen had been here for nearly 3 weeks. Nearly 3 weeks of hiding in a remote cabin attended by Bren's grandmother, a stoic woman named Orleith, who spoke little and watched much. Nearly 3 weeks of jumping at every sound, of scanning the treine for threats that never materialized. Nearly 3 weeks of agony. The bond had not faded with distance. If anything, it had grown stronger, a constant ache in her chest that made sleep nearly impossible. She could still feel Callan, a distant presence like a star on the horizon. But reaching for him was like trying to grasp smoke. And then there were the dreams. They had started on the first night, so vivid that she woke gasping, convinced he was really there beside her. In the dreams, Kaelin came to her in this very cabin. He knelt by her bed and took her hand. He spoke to her in low, urgent tones, telling her things she couldn't quite hear, making promises she couldn't quite remember upon waking. Just dreams, she told herself each morning as she splashed cold water on her face. Nothing more. But the dreams felt different from normal dreams. They had a weight to them, a texture, as if the boundary between sleeping and waking had grown dangerously thin. On the 20th night, Eloan woke to find that she was not alone. Moonlight streamed through the cabin window, illuminating a figure standing at the foot of her bed. Tall and broad-shouldered with silver-gray hair that caught the pale light. "Calm, you're not real," Elowen whispered, pulling the blankets to her chest. "You're a dream, am I?" He moved closer and she saw his face clearly now. the exhaustion carved into his features, the desperate hunger in his silver eyes. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Every night I walk the dream paths, searching for your light. Dream paths, your gift, the shadow walk." He sat on the edge of her bed, and she felt the mattress dip beneath his weight. Felt it. "You've been calling to me, Elowen. Every time you sleep, your power reaches out." I finally learned to answer. Her pulse raced now. "That's impossible. I can't." "You can. You just don't know how to control it yet." He reached out and touched her cheek, and his hand was warm and solid and real. "I'm really here. Not my body, but my spirit. Your power brought me to you." Elowen's breath caught. If this was real, if he was actually here. "Is Adidora?" she said suddenly. "What's happened? Is it safe for me to return?" The light in Kaelin's eyes dimmed. "Not yet. She's consolidated power among the old families, those who oppose the mate bond on principle. She's telling them that you bewitched me, that your magic is a threat to the kingdom. Is anyone listening?" "Too many." His jaw clenched. "She's also done something else, something I only discovered yesterday." "What?" Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was hollow with grief. "The dungeons where you were held, the poison Isadora used to keep you weak. It wasn't just ordinary cruelty." He met her eyes. "She knew what you were. Elowen, somehow she knew about your power before I ever caught your scent." Cold dread pulled in Elowen's stomach. "How is that possible?" "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." He took both her hands in his, and despite everything, warmth flooded through her at the contact. "I'm so sorry I sent you away. Every day without you is torture for me as well." The admission escaped before she could stop it. "The bond, it hurts. It's like something inside me is constantly reaching for something it can't find." Pain flickered across his face. "The incomplete bond. Moran warned me this would happen." "What do you mean, incomplete? A claiming bite forges only half the bond. The other half." He stopped, seeming to war with himself. "The other half requires you to bite me. In return." Elowen stared at him. "I bite you to complete the bond, to become truly mated." His silver eyes held hers with devastating intensity. "I would never ask it of you, Elowen, not after how this began. But without the completion, the bond will continue to cause you pain. It might even—" He stopped again. "It might even—" "What?" Elowen impressed. "Nothing. It doesn't matter." He squeezed her hands. "We have time. I'll find a way to fix this. I promise. I'll find a way to keep you safe and break Isadora's hold." And the dream began to fracture around them. Elowen felt reality tugging at her, pulling her back toward waking. Callan's form flickered like a candle in the she wind. "Wait!" She gripped his hands tighter. "Don't go, not yet. I'll come back tomorrow night. I'll come back every night until you can come home." His voice was fading. "Remember that I'm real. Remember that this is real. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, know that you are mine, and I am yours, and nothing will change that. Nothing." He vanished. Elowen jolted awake to gray dawn light filtering through the cabin window. Her hands were clenched on empty air, and her cheeks were wet with tears. She didn't remember crying. The door creaked open, and Orleith entered with a breakfast tray. You cried out in the night, she said, her voice rough as tree bark. Bad dreams? Elowyn opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped, because lying on the pillow beside her, exactly where Kaelin's hand had rested moments before, was a single gray wolf's hair, not a dream after all. She was still staring at the impossible evidence when another figure appeared in the doorway. Bren, his face grave with news. Someone's coming, he said. From the palace, a healer named Marin. She says it's urgent. An hour later, Elowyn sat across from Marin in the cabin's small main room. The old healer's face was drawn with exhaustion and something deeper, something that looked terribly like grief. Tell me, Elowyn said, fear coiling in her stomach. Whatever it is, just tell me. Marin reached across and took Elowyn's hands, just as Kaelin had done in the dream. The incomplete bond, she said quietly. I should have explained more before you left. The truth is, when an alpha claims a mate who doesn't complete the bond in return, the magic doesn't simply cause pain. What does it do? It consumes the unclaimed partner's life force. Marin's amber eyes glistened. The bond is meant to be reciprocal, a circle of power flowing between two souls. When it flows only one direction, she stopped. When it flows only one direction, Elowyn finished for her. It drains the one who was claimed. Yes, Marin's grip tightened. You've been suffering more than pain, haven't you? Exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure. Weakness in your limbs. Moments where you forget where you are or what you were doing. Elowyn thought of the spells of dizziness that had plagued her, the times she had woken disoriented, unsure if hours or days had passed. She had blamed the stress, the displacement, and the dreams. But it had been the bond all along. How long do I have? She whispered. Marin's silence was answer enough. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of a death sentence. The bond is killing you, child. You have days, not weeks. There must be another way. Elowyn paced the small cabin, her shadow gift flickering restlessly around her fingers. Outside, a storm was gathering, dark clouds swallowing the mountain peaks. It felt appropriate somehow, as if the sky itself mourned her impending fate. Marin sat by the fire, her weathered face carved with sorrow. I've searched every text, consulted every elder I could reach. The only cure for an incomplete bond is completion. Then I'll complete it. Elowyn stopped pacing, resolve hardening in her chest. I'll go back to Vidoria. I'll find Kaelin and you won't survive the journey. Marin's voice was gentle but firm. The bond has already drained too much of your strength. Even with horses, even at full speed, your body would fail before you reached the palace gates. Elwyn sank onto the edge of her bed, despair washing over her. So I'm supposed to just sit here and wait to die? There is one possibility. Marin hesitated, clearly warring with herself. The blood moon rises in 3 days. It's said that the old magic runs strongest during the crimson night. If we could bring Kaelin here to you. How? You just said I can't survive the journey. He certainly can't abandon his kingdom, for the cabin door crashed open. Bren stumbled inside, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Behind him, silhouetted against the storm-dark sky, stood a figure Elowyn had hoped never to see again. Isadora, did you really think? The would-be Luna purred, stepping over the threshold. That I wouldn't find you. Guards poured in behind her. A dozen wolves in human form, their eyes gleaming with predatory light. They seized Bren before he could reach for his weapon, forcing him to his knees. Eloin's shadows surged instinctively, but Isadora merely laughed. "Oh, please do try your little tricks." She raised her hand, and Eloin saw something glinting between her fingers. A vial filled with silver-black liquid. "Do you know what this is?" Cold recognition flooded through Eloin. She had seen that color before in her dreams in Marin's warnings about the ancient poisons used to purge the old magic from Vidoria. "Shadow's bane," Marin breathed. "Where did you get that?" "My family kept the old formulas." Isadora's smile was razor sharp. "We were the ones who led the purges after all. Did you think we'd forgotten how to kill witches?" She moved closer, and Eloin felt her shadows recoil from the vial's proximity. The poison seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, hungry for her power. "I've been planning this for years," Isadora continued, circling Eloin like a predator. "The moment I discovered what you were, I knew you'd be a threat. So I had you arrested. Had you weakened in the dungeons with small doses of this very poison, just enough to suppress your abilities without killing you outright." "Why?" Eloin's voice emerged as barely audible. "I was nobody. I didn't even know Kaelin existed." But fate knew. Isadora's beautiful face twisted with hatred. "The seers warned me years ago that a shadow walker would steal my throne. I searched for decades, eliminated every possibility, and still you survived, hidden in plain sight, sewing my dresses while destiny conspired against me." She grabbed Eloin's chin, forcing their eyes to meet. "No more. Tonight I end this. I'll tell Kaelin you died from the incomplete bond that his foolish claiming killed you before I could intervene. He'll be devastated, of course, but eventually he'll need a Luna, and I'll be there, patient and loyal, ready to comfort him in his grief. He'll know." Eloin pulled free from Isadora's grip. "The bond connects us. He'll feel me die and know something's wrong." "Will he?" Isadora's smile returned colder than before. "The shadow's bane doesn't just kill Little Witch. It severs. It will cut the bond so cleanly that Kaelin won't feel a thing. One moment you'll exist in his heart. The next you'll simply be gone. A clean eraser." She uncorked the vial. Eloin's shadows erupted. Darkness exploded outward from her body, far stronger than she'd ever managed before. Guards flew backward, crashing into walls. The vial was knocked from Isadora's hand, shattering on the stone floor, but the poison was already in the air. Eloin inhaled before she could stop herself, and agony lanced through her chest. Her shadows flickered, wavered, began to dissolve like smoke in sunlight. No. She tried to gather her power, but it slipped through her mental fingers like water. Isadora rose from where she'd fallen, her green eyes blazing with triumph. "Foolish girl, did you think a single vial was my only weapon?" She drew another vial from her cloak, then another, then another. "I came prepared to end you a dozen times over." Isadora advanced, and Eloin stumbled backward, her legs failing beneath her. "Your shadows can't save you now." The cabin door exploded inward for the second time. But this time, it wasn't guards who entered. It was wolves. Massive silver-furred wolves, their eyes blazing gold as they lunged at Isadora's guards. Snarls and screams filled the air. Ilan saw Marin being pulled to safety by Bren, saw Isadora shrieking commands that no one obeyed, and then she saw him, a wolf larger than all the others, his fur the color of storm clouds, his eyes molten silver that burned with desperate fury. He barreled through the chaos, scattering guards like leaves, his entire being focused on one goal, her Colleen. But even as relief flooded through her, the poison was spreading. Eloin felt it in her veins, cold and corrupting, eating away at everything that made her herself. Her shadow gift, her strength, her connection to the man racing toward her. Kaelin. His name emerged as barely a breath. He reached her just as her legs gave out completely. His wolf form shimmered, twisted, and suddenly it was his human arms catching her. His human voice crying out her name. Eloin, stay with me, stay with me. But the poison was stronger than her will. Eloin felt the bond between them flickering, weakening, the silver thread that connected their souls beginning to fray. She tried to hold on, tried to keep the connection alive through sheer determination. But the Shadow's bane was designed for exactly this purpose. I'm sorry, she whispered, looking up into Kaelin's anguished face. I wanted more time. No, his voice cracked. No, you don't get to leave me. The blood moon rises tomorrow. We can complete the bond, cure the poison, save you. Too late. Eloin felt her consciousness beginning to fade. It's already too late. Deep within her, something was happening. The poison and the incomplete bond were reacting to each other, creating a cascade of destruction that she couldn't stop. But there was something else, too, something unexpected, her wolf. The claiming bite had begun changing her 3 weeks ago, but she had never felt it before now. Never since the animal spirit that Kaelin's bite had awakened in her blood. Now, as she lay dying in his arms, her wolf rose up, not in acceptance of death, but in defiance of it. Pain erupted through Eloin's body. Her bones began to crack and shift, her muscles tearing and reforming. She heard herself scream, heard Kaelin shouting for Marin, felt hands trying to hold her still as her spine arched off the ground. She's shifting, Marin's voice sharp with disbelief. The wolf is trying to burn out the poison. Is that possible? I don't know. I've never seen the transformation stalled. Eloin hung suspended between forms, neither human nor wolf, her bones frozen mid-change. The agony was beyond anything she had ever imagined. 1,000 deaths compressed into a single endless moment. She couldn't complete the shift. The poison had weakened her too much, and her wolf didn't have the strength to finish what it had started. Eloin. Kaelin's face swam above her, tears streaming down his cheeks. Fight it, please fight it. But Eloin couldn't fight anymore. The darkness took her, and this time she didn't think she would wake up. 3 days had passed since Isadora's attack, and Kaelin had known grief before. He had lost his father to war when he was 12, had watched his mother fade to shadow after the king's death. Her bond-broken heart, unable to survive without her mate. He had thought he understood loss, understood the hollowing devastation of having something precious ripped away. He had understood nothing. Eloin lay on the cabin floor, her body frozen in grotesque transformation, neither human nor wolf. Her breathing was so shallow that he had to press his ear to her chest to confirm she still lived. Her heartbeat was barely a flutter, a candle flame guttering in a hurricane. There must be something. His voice was hoarse from hours of desperate pleading. "Marin, please. There must be something we can do." The old healer knelt beside him, her face gray with exhaustion. They had worked through the night, trying every remedy, every ancient technique, every prayer to gods who seemed determined to ignore them. Nothing had worked. "The blood moon rises tonight," Marin said quietly. If she survives until then, the lunar magic might give her wolf the strength to complete the transformation. And if she doesn't survive, Marin didn't answer. She didn't need to. Kaelin gathered Eloin's twisted form into his arms, careful not to jostle the bones that had frozen midship. She weighed almost nothing, as if death was already claiming pieces of her soul. "I did this," the words tore from him like shards of glass. "I bit her without consent, bonded her without permission, and now she's dying because of my wolf's selfishness." "Your wolf recognized its mate," Marin said gently. "That's not selfishness, that's destiny." "Destiny?" Kaelin laughed, and the sound was awful. "What kind of destiny kills the one person you're meant to love?" He pressed his forehead to Eloin's, breathing in her fading scent. She still smelled like midnight flowers and autumn rain. But beneath that was something acrid, the poison eating her from within. "I should have refused the claiming urge, should have fought harder against my wolf, should have denied your very nature." Marin shook her head. "A wolf cannot refuse its mate any more than the tide can refuse the moon. What happened between you was written in stars older than this world. Then the stars are cruel." Marin was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of ancient knowledge. "There is one thing we haven't tried." Colin's head snapped up. "Tell me the completion ritual. If you could somehow trigger it, the reciprocal bond might give her wolf the strength it needs." "She can't bite me." Callan gestured at Eloin's frozen form. "She can barely breathe. Not a physical bite, a spiritual one." Marin's amber eyes held his. "Your shadow walker can move through dreams, can touch minds while bodies sleep. If you could reach her wherever her spirit has fled, if you could guide her back to herself." "How? I'm no shadow walker. I can't. You walked her dreams before. She told me that first night you found each other across the miles. The bond allowed it." Marin gripped his arm. "The bond is still there, Kaelin. Damaged and fading, but not gone. If you follow it deep enough, you might find her." Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in Kaelin's chest. "What do I do?" Marin guided him to lie beside Eloin's broken body. She placed his hand over her stuttering heart, positioned his forehead against hers. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Find the thread that connects you. Follow it into the dark." Colin closed his eyes. At first, there was nothing but blackness. He searched for the bond, for that silver thread that had always pulsed between them, but found only void. Then, so faint he almost missed it. A glimmer, he followed it. The darkness gave way to a landscape of shadow and mist. Callan found himself standing in a forest that seemed to exist outside of time. Its trees twisted into impossible shapes, its paths leading in directions that hurt to contemplate. "Eloin," his voice echoed strangely, multiplying and fracturing. "Elowen, where are you?" "Nothing," answered but the wind. Kaelin walked for what felt like hours, following the fading thread of their bond through the nightmare forest. The trees grew denser, the paths more treacherous. Twice he nearly lost the connection entirely, saved only by clinging to the memory of her face, her voice, her scent. Finally, he found her. She sat at the base of an ancient oak, her form flickering between human and wolf like a candle in the wind. Her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful, too peaceful. Elowen. He fell to his knees beside her. "Elowen, you have to wake up. You have to come back." Her eyes opened slowly, and they held no recognition. "Who are you?" Kaelin's heart shattered. "Your mate, your bonded partner, the man who loves you." "I don't remember, love." Her voice was distant, dreamy. "I don't remember anything. It's peaceful here, quiet. I think I'd like to stay." "No." He grabbed her hands and they felt insubstantial beneath his grip. "No, you can't stay. Our bond isn't complete. If you die here, if you fade away, then it will stop hurting." She smiled, and it was the saddest thing he had ever seen. Everything hurts so much out there, the poison and the change and the breaking. Here, nothing hurts at all. Kaelin understood then what he was truly fighting. Not the poison, not the incomplete transformation. He was fighting her desire to surrender. "I know it hurts," he said softly. "I know what I did to you was wrong. The bite, the bond, all of it. You never asked for any of this. You were just a seamstress living your quiet life. And my wolf destroyed everything." Elowen's flickering form grew slightly more solid. She was listening. "But if you come back to me," Kaelin continued, pouring every ounce of love and desperation into his words, "I swear on my crown, my kingdom, my very soul, that I will spend the rest of my life making it right. I will give you choices. I will give you freedom. I will give you everything you were denied." Tears slipped down Elowen's translucent cheeks. "You can't promise that." "I can. I am. I'm the Alpha King of Vidoria, and my word is law." He cupped her flickering face in his hands. "Come back to me alone and complete the bond. Claim me as I claimed you, and we'll face whatever comes together." For one endless moment, and she hesitated. Then her hands rose to grip his wrists, and her eyes cleared, and she was there again. Truly there, the woman he loved, fighting her way back from the brink. "How," she whispered, "how do I claim you here? The same way I claimed you." He tilted his head, baring his throat. "Bite me, Elowen. Complete the bond and let it pull you home." She leaned forward. But before her teeth could find his skin, the shadow forest convulsed. Dark tendrils erupted from the ground, wrapping around Elowen's spirit form, dragging her away from him. "The poison," she screamed. "It knows what we're trying to do." Kaelin lunged for her, but the tendrils were too fast. They pulled her down into the darkness, and her screams echoed long after she vanished. He woke gasping on the cabin floor. Hours had passed. The blood moon now hung full and crimson outside the window, casting everything in shades of red. Beside him, Elowen's body had gone completely still. Marin pressed her ear to the Shadow Walker's chest, then sat back, her face crumpling. "I'm sorry," her voice broke. "I'm so sorry." "She's gone." Kaelin stared at Elowen's lifeless form. at the half-transformed body that no longer drew breath, at the face of the woman he had loved and lost in the space of a single moon cycle. Something inside him snapped. "Your Majesty!" Bren's voice came from somewhere distant. "Your Majesty, what do you want us to do?" Kalen rose slowly to his feet. When he spoke, his voice was ice. "Take her body to the sacred grove, the place where my ancestors first received the wolf blessing." He moved toward the door. "I'll follow shortly." "Sire, what are you?" "I'm going to summon the Elder Council." Kalen didn't turn around. "I'm going to confess my crime of unconnected claiming, and then I'm going to accept the traditional punishment." Marin gasped. "Cullen, no, the traditional punishment for unconnected claiming is death." He stepped into the blood-red light of the rising moon. "I know the Shadow Realm was cold." Eloin drifted through it, formless and fading, aware that something had gone terribly wrong. The dark tendrils still held her, but their grip was weakening, as if whatever power had animated them was finally exhausting itself. She remembered Kalen's face, his voice, his desperate plea for her to come back. And she remembered what she had been about to do when the darkness took her. Claim him. Complete the bond. Bite. The words echoed through her dissolving consciousness. She was dying, truly dying now, not just in body, but in spirit. Soon there would be nothing left of Eloin Thorne, the seamstress, the shadow walker, the reluctant mate of a king. No, the refusal came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place she hadn't known existed. Not her human mind, not her shadow gift, her wolf. The animal spirit that Kalen's bite had awakened. The creature that had tried so desperately to save her through transformation was still alive, trapped, weakened, but burning with a fury that would not accept defeat. "He is ours," the wolf snarled inside her. "He is ours, and we will not let him die." "What do you mean?" Ilan asked. "I'm the one dying." "No." The wolf's presence grew stronger, forcing back the consuming darkness. "He believes we are dead. He goes now to the sacred grove. He means to end his life for the crime of claiming us." Horror flooded through Eloin's fading spirit. Kalen couldn't die. Not for her, not because of her. "Then fight!" The wolf's voice was thunder. "Stop surrendering. You have power beyond anything the poison can touch. You are a shadow walker. These shadows are your domain. Command them." Eloin looked at the dark tendrils that bound her, at the nightmare realm that had become her prison. And she saw them differently, not as enemies, not as poison made manifest, as shadows, her shadows, extensions of the gift she had feared and hidden her entire life. "You cannot command what you do not accept." Her mother had once told her, "The shadow gift is part of you, Eloin. Embrace it, and it will become your greatest strength." For the first time in her life, Eloin stopped fighting her power. She embraced it. Darkness exploded outward from her spirit form, but this time she controlled it. The tendrils that had imprisoned her dissolved into her being, becoming fuel rather than chains. The nightmare forest bent to her will, its twisted paths straightening, its impossible geometry making sudden perfect sense. She was a shadow walker, and shadows could not hold her against her will. "Wake up," the wolf commanded. "Wake up and shift." Eloin opened her eyes. She lay in the sacred grove, her broken body arranged on an ancient stone altar. The blood moon hung enormous in the sky, painting everything in shades of crimson. Around her, she could hear voices, movement, the gathering of wolves for some terrible ceremony. Her bones were still frozen mid-transformation. Her muscles still refused to cooperate, but something had changed. The wolf inside her was no longer alone. The shadow gift, fully awakened and finally accepted, flowed through Eloine's veins like liquid night. It didn't fight the transformation this time. Instead, it merged with it. Dark power amplifying wolf magic until both burned brighter than they ever could alone. Eloine's spine arched off the altar as the shift resumed. This time, there was no stalling, no freezing. Her bones cracked and reformed with supernatural speed. Fur erupted across her skin, silver white as moonlight on snow. Her senses expanded, sharpened, and became something beyond human comprehension. When the transformation completed, a wolf stood where a dying woman had lain. But not just any wolf. Eloine fur shimmered with threads of living shadow, dark tendrils that danced around her like extensions of her will. Her eyes burned gold, but within that gold swirled depths of absolute darkness. She was something new, something that had never existed before, a shadow wolf. She threw back her head and howled. The sound shattered the night, echoing off mountains, rippling through forests, reaching across distances that should have been impossible. It was a howl of rebirth, of defiance, of a mate calling to her other half. Miles away in the deepest part of the sacred grove, Callan heard it. He knelt before the elder council, his head bowed, the ceremonial blade already raised above his neck. He had confessed his crime, had accepted the judgment, was ready to pay the price for what his wolf had done. Then Eloine's howl reached him, and everything changed. She lives. The words tore from him as he lunged to his feet. She lives. Impossible. The eldest counselor said. The healer confirmed her death. This is merely a wild wolf, who another howl closer this time, and with it a voice that echoed through the bond in Callan's chest. A voice he would recognize across any distance. Mine. Callan shifted before the council could react. His wolf form exploded outward, massive and powerful, and he was running, crashing through the forest toward the source of that impossible, beautiful sound. He found her at the edge of the sacred grove, silver white fur gleaming under the blood moon. Shadow tendrils dancing around her form like living extensions of her soul, golden eyes that held darkness and light in perfect balance. His mate, his Eloine, transformed into something magnificent. They circled each other slowly, wolves recognizing wolves, the bond between them pulsing stronger than it ever had. Callan's wolf wanted to howl, to leap, to celebrate the miracle of her survival. But something was still incomplete. Eloine moved first. She lunged, not to attack, but to claim. Her teeth found the juncture of his neck and shoulder, sinking deep into fur and muscle and bone. Callan felt the bond explode between them, the incomplete thread suddenly becoming an unbreakable chain. Power flowed both directions. Now he felt her, truly felt her, not just as a presence in his chest, but as an extension of his very soul. Her fears, her hopes, her fierce determination, her overwhelming love, all of it poured into him as his own emotions poured into her. Two halves becoming one whole, When she released him, they stood nose to nose, breathing the same air, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. Then Ilwyn shifted. The transformation flowed like water, smooth and painless, until she stood before him in human form, but changed. Shadow tendrils still danced across her skin, and her eyes retained that swirling golden darkness that marked her as something beyond ordinary wolf or human. Kaelin shifted too, catching her as her legs wobbled beneath her. "You died," he breathed, pulling her against his chest. "You stopped breathing. Your heart stopped beating." I felt the bond go dark. I was lost, she admitted, her voice in the shadow realm, drowning in poison and despair. But my wolf refused to let me go, and my shadows, my gift, I finally accepted what I am. And what is that? Eloine smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Kaelin had ever seen. "Yours," she said simply, "completely and irrevocably yours." He kissed her then, beneath the blood moon, surrounded by wolves who had gathered to witness their king's execution and had instead witnessed something far more miraculous. The completion of a fated bond, the birth of a new Luna, the union of shadow and wolf. Around them, the pack began to howl, one voice after another joining the chorus, until the entire grove rang with celebration. Even the elder council, stunned by what they had witnessed, added their voices to the song. In the distance, held captive by the wolves who had accompanied Kaelin, Isadora watched with hollow eyes. Her schemes had crumbled, her poison had failed. The Shadow Walker she had tried so desperately to destroy had risen more powerful than ever before. Tomorrow she would face judgment for her crimes. Tonight she could only watch as everything she had coveted slipped forever beyond her reach. Colin pulled back from the kiss just far enough to rest his forehead against Eloine's. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now," he laughed, and it was a sound of pure joy. "Now we go home. We build a kingdom where no one with the old magic ever has to hide again." "That's quite a list. We have time." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the shadow tendrils that danced across her cheekbones. "We have forever." Eloin leaned into his touch, feeling the bond pulse between them, strong and complete and eternal. She had been locked beneath the palace, forgotten and condemned. She had been poisoned, transformed, killed, and reborn. She had walked through shadows and emerged carrying their power as her own. And now, standing in the sacred grove with the blood moon overhead and her mate's arms around her, Eloin finally understood what she had gained from all that suffering. Not just a crown or a kingdom or even the love of an alpha king. She had gained herself, her whole true powerful self, and she would never hide again.